So I'm at the Kapiti library and I just wanted to share with you an exhibition that I just finished hanging up. It's a whole bunch of quotes and drawings of feminists and feminist writers, and I wanted to share it, but I also wanted to put it on record and document what I've done, because who knows if Action Station will start a petition or something like that. And I'm going away over summer and I'm worried that it's going to get torn down because, you know, it might be an accessible community space here, but we know that feminists often present an exception to those kinds of general principles of accessibility and free speech. So this is my exhibition at the Kapiti Library at the moment. I've also been told in the last few days that I talk too much by a very vocal cross-dresser in Wellington, and also that I need to read a book by a woman who spoke at the abortion rights rally on Wednesday, so this could be also construed as a response to that. So this exhibition begins with a quote from Ninochka Rosca, who helped found a Filipino feminist group called Gabriella, who make connections between patriarchy, militarism, prostitution and colonization. And part of the reason they do that and why they founded was because when the US military bases moved into the Philippines, brothels were established around the bases, and then women started to get blamed, Filipino women, for the spread of STDs. So Gabriella started up in opposition to that. But these are kind of general introductory quotes to introduce my exhibition, but these two from Shayla Jeffries and Megan Tyler relate to the liberal feminist context that we're all kind of marinating in at the moment, which is encouraging women to think of things like porn and cosmetic surgery as mere choices and not a result of a patriarchal system. And then this wall here is a lot of historical feminism, and it starts with a quote from Mary Daly from her book Gynecology, which sheds light on the witch craze, that it wasn't just a freak historic episode but a systematic effort to take women's health out of women's hands and establish gynecology as a male-dominated discipline. And then Janice Raymond, this is a quote from her book Women as Wombs, which talks about reproductive technology closer to the present day, and the patriarchal forms that takes. And this is a great quote from an article that Cherry Smiley wrote, which is called Real Change for Aboriginal Women Begins with the End of Prostitution. You can find that online. Noel El-Sadawi is a legendary Egyptian feminist, and this quote comes from a book of hers called The Hidden Face of Eve. Another quote from Megan Tyler's piece called No, Feminism Isn't About Choice, and that article can be found online on a website called The Conversation. These two quotes are from Ida B. Wells and Harriet Tubman, both slavery abolitionists. And these two from Dorothy Roberts and Angela Davis, who have both written about slavery, and it's specifically also about the treatment of women in slavery and the way that women in slavery were subjected to both sexism and racism. Dorothy Roberts' work relates closely to Janice Raymond's. She talks especially about things like canola plant and other contraceptives like that, and the racialised way that they're tested and dispensed and forced upon black women. The suffragists, who were very much inspired by the slavery abolitionists. I think Susan B. Anthony's quote here is very pertinent today, especially if, anyway, I won't go there. Virginia Woolf, who wrote my favourite essay, Three Guineas. Simone de Beauvoir, who people love to misinterpret. Quotes from feminist economist Marilyn Waring, New Zealander, talking about the place of women in the international economic system. I like this one. And I learned about Johnny Tillman from Howard Zinn's book, People's History of the United States. Just a quote for men who feel uncomfortable or indifferent about women's issues or don't think they're very important. Something to keep in mind. These two posters here, pictures of the suffragists, which I wasn't allowed to hang in Wellington through phantom bill stickers. Apparently these images present a subtle transphobia which can be found right here. Yep. This is a kind of a funny statement to put on a quote picture. I think Mary Lou Singleton has said many more eloquent things than this, but we're living in a time when this has now become a profound political statement. So there you go. And it's had to be closely followed by a reassurance that I'm not wanting to kill anybody. Yeah, so that quote comes from Audre Lorde, an essay she wrote about sadomasochism, which I think is actually quite a central element of so-called liberal feminism. So that essay deserves rereading. There's Chelsea again, and this is a quote from one of my favourite feminist writers, Cynthia Enloe, talking about the consequences of silencing women or not letting women speak. Silence has made us dumb. Another quote from Cynthia Enloe, whose book Bananas, Beaches and Bases is actually how I found out about Gabriela, the Filipino organisation. And another quote reassuring people that feminists are not actually bloodthirsty bigots. A great statement from a classic second wave piece by Adrienne Rich about compulsory heterosexuality. And then here are two statements, one from Hebo Waderi, who wrote a great book on FGM called Cut, and another statement from Masi Alinijad, which I've put in this place to kind of illustrate what Adrienne Rich meant by compulsory heterosexuality and how it manifests. think that also makes a good context for Caitlin Roper's statement here. Sexual harassment is not a compliment, it's a statement of power. And Leah Keith has written incredible essays about patriarchy, and here's another manifestation of compulsory heterosexuality and this institutionalization of masculinity and femininity. And Na-Yeon Kim is a feminist from South Korea who fights against prostitution and trafficking. This is a quote from Robin Morgan. My favourite book of hers is called Demon Lover. But this quote comes from her opening to a book called Women in Russia. And Gita Lerner again, whose main work was incredible history. She wrote a book called The Creation of Patriarchy, and another one called The Creation of Feminist Consciousness. So she studied the creation of patriarchy from the origins and sort of the time of King Hammurabi, and then her book about feminist consciousness looks at the feminist mystics in the Middle Ages all the way up till the 19th century. And Vandana Shiva has published a few books with Spinifex Press. One's called Soil, Not Oil, and the other one's called Staying Alive, the two that I've read. And she writes about basically what I would summarize as the gendered nature of neoliberalism, especially in India. So what happens when land is confiscated and privatised by corporations and agribusiness and big oil, what happens to women versus men. And some final statements from Marilyn French, Bell Hooks, and I really like this one from Ray Story, and also think it's very relevant to a New Zealand context at the moment. And then this one from Sarah Deaton got a whole board of its own because I love it.